Welcome to Lynn Cullen Live. Talk radio without the static. Email your questions and comments to lynncullenshow@gmail.com. And now your host, Lynn Cullen.
Hey, and hello to you. Well, welcome to the show. The dog is with me, and he seems to think that because I started talking all of a sudden that I want to play. No. Hey. Okay. I think we'll be okay. He's going to be picked up in a sec. How you doing? It's August 24th. Why am I talking like that? I don't know. I usually have like a ton of stuff in front of me, fodder for the program. And today I am looking at a very empty, slate. However, I feel like I have a subject that, frankly, I've been trying to get to all week. I guess we're going to do it today. That is so important. It's just so important. And to me, nothing is more important than the ongoing subversion of our democracy. But one of the things that Democrats have yet to learn, and if we don't learn it like tomorrow or yesterday, or I think yesterday, that would be it. We're in trouble. We have got to understand that elections happen all the time, and that the so-called little elections are probably the most important ones. The closer an entity of government gets to you, the more power it has on your life. So, city councils, school boards, most people don't think at all about these governmental entities, and yet these are the ones. And these are the ones Republicans have been spending decades paying attention to. And it's one of the reasons they, of course, control half of the state's legislatures, 25. And since so much power sits in those state capitals, the potential for undermining democracy is huge in those state capitals. And Republicans who control half of those state capitals are losing no time in their mission: cripple government, to cripple democracy. So January 6th, we all saw this clear attempt to overthrow our government, to subvert democracy. But that showy kind of insurrection is not the norm. What often happens quietly, slowly, in places like Harrisburg and Columbus and Madison, Wisconsin. It happens in state legislatures controlled solely by Republicans. And we pay no attention to what they're doing. And what they're doing is, first of all, solidifying their power through gerrymandering so that they don't even have to listen to the voters anymore, because they have created maps in which they are all secure. So imagine the power that gives them. And there was a terrifying, fascinating piece in the New Yorker that focused just on one such legislature, so that anyone reading it can see immediately, oh my God, this is ground zero. It ain't Washington, D.C. It is every state capital. That is where the power lies. That is where the power is being consolidated, not by us, by them. And that is where democracy is being subverted. The state that the piece looks at is our neighbor, Ohio. And Ohio and Pennsylvania have an awful lot in common. They're big, mostly rural, big cities, few major cities that are blue, and everything else looks pretty red. Both states have capitals, legislatures that are controlled by the Republicans. Ohio has a government that is wholly in the hands of the Republicans. Even though there's millions upon millions of Democrats that live there. I don't know about millions upon millions, Democrats that live there, but they have been shut out. And for that matter, a lot of the people who voted Republicans have been shut out because, as I said, any Republican holding office in Ohio at the state level doesn't have to worry. The only worry they ever have is in primaries being challenged from their right. And to keep that from happening, you get more and more and more right-wing, lunatic, crazy folks in the legislature. One of the people that was interviewed in this piece was the former head of the Ohio Democratic Party. The hapless position at the moment. So he sort of watched as the Democrats lost everything. And it's odd because, here again, and this shows how gerrymandering works so well. When Ohio voters go to the polls, they have voted statewide elections for one of the more liberal Democrats to represent them in the U.S. Senate, Sherrod Brown. Okay? Well, how the hell is that possible when you've got their state house totally in the hands of right-wing crazies? That's how gerrymandering works. Statewide race. There is no district borders. That is a truer representation. So a state that says Sherrod Brown, and for that matter, just maybe could send a second Democratic senator, I can his name, Ryan, running against the horror J.D. Vance, Trump endorsed, for that Senate, the second Senate seat. It is conceivable that this incredibly Republican-controlled state, when the voters go to the polls and they vote in a statewide election, they're nowhere near as right-wing as their legislature. So how did that happen? Well, first of all, Democrats pay no attention to these races. Don't. And this poor guy that used to head the Democratic Party there, he says, think about it. How many people, what percentage of people do you think can even name their state representative or their state senator? Now, I bet a lot of you can because you're political junkies. You're the folks who pay attention. But I bet even a lot of you can't. I think for a long time I wasn't sure. I would say to myself, I know Dan Frankel, but is he my senator or is he my representative? No, seriously, he's my representative, by the way. Most Americans can't. And here's another big problem. Local media barely cover government. Barely cover it. And because local media is in distress, it's fighting to stay alive, they do not have the resources that they once had. And so things that get cut are things like an actual little bureau that a paper might have had in a state capital that allows the people who used to read those local newspapers to follow maybe what their representatives and senators were doing there. That is disappearing. Local television, they don't cover state government. And so news bureaus that used to be ensconced in state capitals all over this country are literally hardly represented there. And this poor guy who used to run the Democrats in Ohio says, I'm banging my head against the wall. Then he paraphrases James Carville. He says, my God, Democrats, don't you get it? It's the state houses, stupid. That's where the attack is happening. And that's where the attack is succeeding. Nothing quite as flashy that it's going to get onto the news, like a January 6th insurrection. No, this subversion is happening right in front of us in public, in these halls of power. Not being covered. And even if it were, very few people would pay attention. And Republicans are going to town. So let's look at Ohio. Again, this state is just totally in the thrall of this Republican Party. And as we know, this Republican Party is not a Democratic Party anymore. It is an autocratic, increasingly white nationalist party. Parts of it have flat out gotten into what clearly is fascist territory. They employ intimidation and violence. And they feel that they are right to do so. I mean, polls show that this incredible percentage of Republicans actually think now that it's perfectly all right to commit violence to gain your political desires. So the Republicans now in Ohio, this is just a case study because this could well be Pennsylvania. They have in their House of Representatives 2 Republicans for every Democrat in that body. The Democrats have no power. They can't advance legislation. They can't do a thing. In the Senate, they have 3 Republicans for, actually more than 3 Republican senators for every 1 Democrat. Obviously, total control, total veto-proof control. And even though the governor always seems to be a Republican, this legislature is well to the right of the governor and has, every time that governor vetoes one of their crazy things, they override, okay? So that's what you got, the lunatics controlling the asylum, totally, in Ohio. Let me give you a sense of some of the fine people that are in that body. Here's a guy who actually is an MD, he's a doctor. And it was last year during COVID. Because he's a doctor, people would listen more to what he thought about it. And he said this: well, the reason the colored population is more vulnerable is that they do not wash their hands as well as other groups. Now, that statement tells you, first of all, it tells you who can get a medical degree. Do you believe that? That level of stupidity and open, unapologetic racism, that is emblematic of who controls Ohio government. Oh, and I forgot to tell you, this guy, the doctor, who says colored people have more problems with COVID because they don't wash their hands as well as, I guess, other groups. He was subsequently, after he made that declaration, he was subsequently named the chairman of the Ohio Senate Health. Okay. There are so many horror stories in this article that I'm believe me, I'm skipping over just tons of stuff. I think I told you, I've been pulling stuff out of this thing for weeks now. I told you about there's next to no Jews either in their legislature, and there's one of two representatives, and he woke up. I told you about this guy. He woke up one Sunday morning, and he had cars and vans blocking his street, and people outside holding signs that said "Kneel before the cross." Now, I don't think the people of Ohio differ from the people of Pennsylvania in any way that I can ascertain. So what I'm telling you about what's happened to Ohio state government could so easily happen here. And it's the thing that drives me nuts about our party leadership, the failure to educate us about the importance of these state races. And when you don't pay attention, you lose the power, the damage that can be done. Now, if you poll folks in Ohio about stuff like, let's see, guns, you might be surprised that a state that is wholly in the hands of the Republicans, the vast majority of Ohioans say they wanted the state legislature to enact gun control laws, including, this is what Ohioans want. They want a ban on high-powered semi-automatic rifles. They want a ban on bump stocks. They want to enact a mandatory waiting period for gun purchases, and they want to raise the minimum age to buy a semi-automatic rifle to 21. None of those things passed. None of those things passed. Because, as I said, the people that control the legislature don't care what the voters want. They are assured of their seats, and so they can do the bidding of the lobbyists who line their pockets. In fact, what did the Ohio legislature do? Here is a state that polls showed most Ohioans wanted these positions taken, and instead, the legislators in Ohio passed a stand your ground law, which, just to make clear, I mean, I always call it a shoot a black for free law. This is a law that says you are totally within your rights to kill somebody, let's say, who trespasses on your property. Okay, somebody steps a foot onto your lawn, you can kill them in Ohio. It's legal. They step a foot onto your property and you can kill without any effort to de-escalate the situation. In other words, you do not have to say, stop. What are you doing? You don't have to say anything. You can just shoot them. When Uvalde massacre there happened, you know what these wonderful Republicans who control Ohio's government did? Boy, did they move fast. They rushed through a law that said any school board in Ohio can immediately arm its teachers or other staff members, including cafeteria workers and bus drivers, and you hardly need to train them. That's what their law says. Maybe not in those words. Actually, the law said you can arm the school bus driver, you can arm the cafeteria lady, you can arm all the teachers, but you do have to give them 24 hours of firearms training. Now, let me just explain here that law enforcement officers in Ohio must undergo 700 hours. When that bill came up, man, people showed up. The people who do pay attention showed up. Hundreds of them, more than 300 speakers, including representatives from the teachers union, including representatives from the state's largest police organization. They all came out and said, no, this is stupid. This is not going to make anybody safer. No, 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 we don't want it. God, the head of the Fraternal Order of Police in Ohio said, this is insane. It passed. % of Ohio voters favor universal background checks you want to buy a gun. It doesn't matter. And here's the thing. What's happening in Ohio is happening in, as I said, half of the other state legislatures. And it's the same bills that they're all passing. How's that? Because they don't write them. What's the job of a state legislator, for God's sakes? You're supposed to, legislate. That means you draw up a bill. And then you shepherd it through the process and it goes to a vote. But that's not how it happens in these legislatures. These bills come to the legislatures wholly written by people who don't live anywhere near Ohio, by lobbyists, by businesses who gather together in groups called like the American Legislative Exchange Council, ALEC. They write laws, and then they send them off to all the Republican-controlled state capitals and say, here's what you're doing this legislative season. This, folks, is not the way it's supposed to work. So when I talk about the subversion of our democracy happening in the state houses, it's been happening for as long as I've been yapping at you. But it's getting, obviously, to the point now where most people who even aren't paying attention can tell something is frightening. But you need to be able to focus on where the threat is. You know, there's a vacant 6-story building that sits directly across from the State House in Ohio. Columbus, right? Yeah. And someone bought it, and they're getting it ready. It's going to become the new headquarters of the Center for Christian Virtue. And the Center for Christian Virtue wanted that property really badly because they wanted to fly their flag directly across from the seat of power, political power. Now, let me make clear to you that despite its name, the Center for Christian Values, this group has been included and classified as a hate group. By the Southern Poverty Law Center, which is pretty good at figuring out, despite what you call yourself, what you really are. But the Center for Christian Virtue wanted to show its power to the legislators who go in and out of the building across the street. And just in the last 5 years, its staff has quintupled, its budget has quadrupled, it's feeling its oats. And as it turns out, if you bother to really look into things, lo and behold, the Center for Christian Virtue appears to be the real author and the real sponsor of some of Ohio's most extreme right-wing bills. They just tap one of their legislators who do their bidding. Say, here, you get this through. This is what we want. Some of the bills that they've been pushing of late, a bill opposing gender-affirming care for transgender youth, even if the parents have consented to it, so overriding a parent. in the raising of that parent's child, the state legislature in Ohio stepping in between. Also, any student, they passed a bill that any student on a girls' sports team can be subject to genital inspection. Yeah. Show us your genitals. I'd really like to be on the volleyball team. Show us your genitals. And that kicks in if anyone questions their gender. And the next thing that happens is you got to show us your genitals. And this poor ex-head of the Democratic Party in Ohio says, see, that's gerrymandering. That's gerrymandering. Show me your genitals. You can't get away with that stuff unless you have unlosable districts. Now, this next part is maybe the most terrifying. Again, the poor people who live in Ohio, who aren't being listened to by their so-called representatives, they don't like these gerrymandered districts they're in and the result of them. And so by 2015, now that's a ways back, that's 7 years ago, Ohio's gerrymandered districts have become so notorious that an overwhelming majority of Ohioans, 71%, voted to pass an amendment to the state constitution demanding reforms. Yeah. So what happened? Nothing. In 2018, an even larger bipartisan majority of Ohioans, 75%, passed a similar resolution pertaining to the state's congressional districts. What happened? Nothing. Republicans paid no mind. And so this last spring, it got the Ohio Supreme Court stepped in and struck down the latest map that the Republicans had drawn up. Bogus, bullshit, gerrymandered map. And the Supreme Court said, you redraw that. That's ridiculous. They redrew it. It goes back to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court says, that's ridiculous. Redraw it. This happened 4 times. 4 times. Ohio Supreme Court said to the redistricting commission with its Republican majority, this will not stand. Redraw that. And you know what? The Republicans kept screwing with this and screwing with the court for so long. You know what they did? They did what I fear they're doing now on a national level. They ran out the clock. And a deadline was looming for the election, for an election. And the makeup of the districts still hadn't been settled because the Supreme Court said these districts are bull. And so because there was no time left, Republicans urged a federal court to step in, to intervene, because the delay was imperiling what they called the fair administration of the upcoming election. And so a panel of 3 federal judges, 2 of whom were appointed by Donald Trump, said, okay, you can keep them gerrymandered districts. The 3rd judge, by the way, on the 3-judge panel went berserk and said that this map is so rigged, that what the federal court did is put in place districts that Ohio Supreme Court had said were unconstitutional. And that's how the last election went down in Ohio. And the head of the Ohio House of Representatives, a child in a man's body named Bill Seitz, took to Twitter to rub it in the faces of, the Democrats. Oh, it's been a tough night for all of you libs. Pour yourself a glass of warm milk. The game is over. You lost. So there you have one of the most corrupt state governments in the country, told by the Supreme Court of its state that it was in violation of the law 4 or 5 times, ignored all of those rulings, went over the Supreme Court's head to a Trump-heavy federal panel, and made an end run. This level of contempt for process, for the people of the state, is business as usual. Ohio. So, what I wanted to point out to you today is there, but for the grace of God. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm seeing I got calls. I'm sorry, I didn't have my screen up. I was too busy ranting. And I do want to bring this back here because I received something from the League of Women Voters here. The League of Women Voters of Pennsylvania, and this is important, guys, so listen up, has filed an application to join in Governor Wolf's challenging of what's called here Senate Bill 106. And if Senate Bill 106 gets through, it would dramatically shift the balance of government power in Pennsylvania to the legislature. It's a number of amendments. You maybe have heard this is happening. Let me just tell you what the League of Women Voters, by the way, I grew up with a sense of the League. My mom was in the League of Women Voters. The woman who headed it in Green Bay went on to head it nationally. Her name was Ruth Lucen. Wondrous woman. And it was totally bipartisan. I mean, there were as many Republican women on that in the league as Democrats. They were just women who wanted to make sure that things were happening properly. So listen to what the league says the Republicans in Harrisburg are intending for us. These amendments, this is going to come to us in the form of proposed constitutional amendments. And if we don't vote right on this, say goodbye to your state government. Say goodbye. We're going to be exactly where Ohio is. These amendments would create significant voter confusion, which is what Republicans love, by asking that we affirm that Pennsylvania impose stricter age limits, stricter residency requirements, all of which are unquestionably in violation of federal law, including a voting age of 21. 21! That directly violates the 26th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. It also affirms, this is what the guys in Harrisburg are doing, putting out just patently unconstitutional crap that they want you to put in the Pennsylvania Constitution. They want the voters to say, oh yeah, we should have a 90-day residency requirement to vote in Pennsylvania. When it's not true. It's a 30-day requirement. These things are put there so that voters nobody knows what's right or what's wrong. The League of Women Voters says publishing this unconstitutional language could well result in people not exercising their right to vote based on just total misinformation being put out by the Republican legislature. You are going to be asked, if these guys have their way, to declare that the state constitution does not grant any right relating to abortion and no right to public funding. They want you to give them the power to stop any regulation with a simple majority. In other words, they want to totally take away executive power, the power of a governor. And obviously, if they get this, the separation of powers, the balance of powers, as defined in the Pennsylvania Constitution, are blown up. They also want more voter ID requirements. We already have, ID requirements. They want to require that elections be audited by the Pennsylvania Auditor General, which only reinforces a lack of trust in election administration, because when there is no need for that lack of trust. It also changes the selection process for lieutenant governor, taking power again away from the voters. They want all the power. The head of the league says about what the Republicans in Harrisburg are up to. This is emblematic of how broken the legislative process is in Harrisburg. The Republican leadership manipulated long-standing procedural rules to ram through a bill with multiple contentious topics, with no public hearings, no minority party input. Democrats didn't even get a word in, and little opportunity for the public as well. And the governor is appealing this with a King's Bench petition, which I don't know what that is. Sounds like something pretty dire. And the league does not normally embroil itself in things like this. So this, again, these are all, canaries in the coal mine. Canaries in the coal mine, folks. And we look the other way at our own peril. All right. I would invite the callers back. I'm sorry. I just didn't have it. Whatever. Let me know if anyone. I, by the way, when I hear that you're there, you've generally been there for a little while. That's just the slow-moving internet I have. I'm sorry. And I have to tell you, I'm not going to be able to watch television for like the next 3 months. These ads are, if you stop and think about the ugliness of these ads, and how we're used to them now. I've never gotten used to them, but they think of how this now norm of how a person runs a campaign in this country has coarsened our politics, has coarsened our culture, has coarsened the way we speak to each other, and maybe even most importantly, how this ugliness that is evidenced in the television and radio ads, how it turns off. It turns everybody off. And you get turned off enough, you stop participating. You start saying things like, oh, they're all like that. They're all liars and corrupt. So why should I take part in this charade? And you see, that's what Republicans want you to do. They want you to stop paying attention. They want you to pull out of the process. Now, what happens when these neo-fascists take over? Well, lots of bad stuff. You see in Ohio what's going on. We know that what the Republicans love more than anything right now is Hungary, because it's run by a guy they all aspire to be, Viktor Orban. How he's taken us, supposedly a democracy, it's just hollowed out now, and created an autocracy in which media is controlled, education is controlled, and democracy is just this, choreographed little dance. Did you see that the national government there actually threw out a meteorologist who said there was going to be a big storm the other night? And so a big fireworks show to celebrate Hungarian, whatever, some big national holiday had to be called off. Then you know what happened. The storm went south. It was there, but it didn't rain where the fireworks were supposed to be. And so the meteorologist was fired at the highest level. The two top officials of Hungary's National Meteorological Service got canned. You can't make Viktor Orban cancel a party. You can't do that and think you're going to survive. Now, I got to tell you, it isn't going down well among the other people still standing at the meteorological service. They're demanding that these people be put back in place, and that you can't fire people because of politics, because the forecast was the best possible forecast at that time, and then no forecast is 100%, and yada, 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 yada. The former president of the American Meteorological Society said, yow, that's outrageous. And I'm sure it makes every forecaster working in Hungary scared that they're going to lose their jobs because of a wrong forecast. Well, remember Trump did. Remember he said he took on our meteorologist during what hurricane was that? There was a hurricane, and Trump said it was going to hit Alabama or something, and it wasn't. And he actually doctored what NASA put out, or NOAA, I don't know which agency that would be, about the path of the hurricane. Remember, took a Sharpie and he drew Alabama in, because that's the same kind of reason why Viktor Orban did what he did. You can't screw up or make the grand leader look less than omnipotent. Since this case made him cancel his big party, you're fired. Scared Alabamans needlessly, doesn't matter. Mike, are you there? I'm sorry. I am just so screwed up here. Hello?
Hey, Lynn, it's Mike in Highland Park.
Hi.
Something that was in that article, it's called Columbus or something, in the New Yorker, was that 10 years ago, not even 10 years ago, Ohio was 5th in the country for public education.
That's correct.
Guess what they are now?
I'm remembering 31st.
Right, 35th.
Oh, yeah, right. And falling like a stone, right. That's the other thing these guys want to do, is dumb everybody down. Turn them off, dumb them down, shut them up.
Right, which is my point, which is why I'm calling, is to say, you know, we deserve the government we get. And I'm an old man, and I only need another 20 years for this grand experiment to exist. But if you have kids or grandkids or people that you're leaving behind, those are the people that should be scared, but they're not. Because I got mine, so screw you. And I don't know, and that's back to the education thing. Do the Republicans not think that the people will get so fed up at some point and revolt? At some point, I don't know when it is, probably not in my lifetime, they will revolt. And what comes after is going to certainly be worse than sharing power with the Democrats.
Well, I think, what's weird is what you just said, is what a lot of Republicans think they are doing right now. They are revolting. Right?
But they're revolting against democracy, against sharing, right? They're revolting against sharing power.
Yeah, they don't believe that.
Right. They
only believe in power. They believed in power when they felt they had power. And the whole racial aspect of this, the learning that white people would be a minority in the country, you shall not replace us. This whole sense that the power they've always known, white Christians, is somehow disappearing on them, is what's caused them, to decide democracy is a piece of crap. Right.
Which is okay if you think that, right? But can you then take the next leap and say, then what? Because if you think it's going to be like Handmaid's Tale and white men are going to be the boss of everything, I just can't imagine that happening when you're subjugating everybody but the white man.
Well, it's happened where minorities do. You know that. Minorities control nations. They do. What apartheid was about.
Right, and look how that turned out. So play the scenario out that you have power, unlimited power, and the frogs will get too hot in that boiling water and jump out. Or the Russian Revolution will happen. Like, too much power in any one person's or group's hands is dangerous. What don't you see about that? What can't they see about that? And you're right, it's education. Because they didn't learn civics. They don't learn about American history or world history.
Well, and that's why a big thing that they're involved in now is turning up the heat on school boards all over the country, intimidating school boards all over the country to what can be taught and what can't be taught. And apparently what can't be taught is anything that makes white people look bad.
And they think that's going to be the solution. They think kids need to be told that white is better, to not see that behavior replicated on the street. They really don't, they can't see past, wow, this could turn ugly for us. Maybe how we have it now with sharing power is good. I just, they're playing checkers when this is a huge, sorry.
They're being led and misled by very powerful forces. And in media, in their churches, often, in their social, groups and institutions, that's all they hear. They don't see, they are not looking at this country and seeing what you see.
Sharing power is bad to them. Yeah, and I think they also confuse, and we've already talked about this many a times, but they're confusing democracy with capitalism. And all of the people who want power over their democracy are capitalists who want that power so they can make more money.
Yeah, well, you're getting me into the territory that made me mix things up with Heather Heidelbaugh and got me,
is that online anywhere?
Oh man, I just remember saying to her, the thing that set her off is when I said, Heather, capitalism, because she got mixed up with capitalism and democracy. I said, capitalism is an economic system. It's not a political system. It's not an ethical, moral system. And she went berserk. She went berserk.
And the whole woke business about companies being canceled and comedians being canceled, I'm sorry, that's capitalism. If you put a sign outside of your grocery store that's a swastika, and then you're surprised that nobody comes to your store, or less people come to your store, that's capitalism. You can't have it both ways. So you like capitalism when it makes you money, but you don't like capitalism when people say, I'm not going in that store.
Well, there's something so childish, so ignorant, so self-centered and pathetic of what we've come to. That I don't know. I just want to throw up my hands. Hey, past 11 o'clock. What?
Well, we only got 20 more years or so. This experiment, I only got to make it another 20 more years for me, Lynn. So screw everybody else. I just need another 20 years out of it.
Well, I just want to tell you that today in London, my family got one person bigger with the birth of a little girl, but my niece, my brother's daughter. And I hope this wondrous little child, who's not even a day old, is going to not suffer because of our indifference.
Mazel tov, by the way. What did they name her?
Her name is, the name is Wren, W-R-E-N. The little girl.
And there'll be 3 other girls with that name in kindergarten with her. How much you want to bet?
Oh, gosh. And if she's anything like her little older brother who was born right as we closed everything down in the pandemic, she's going to be a wonder. So, yeah, Ren. Welcome to the world, Ren. God help you. Okay, you. Yes, thank you. Bye. Thank you. Bye. All right, guys. I'll see you tomorrow. Maybe we'll find something happy to talk
about. Lynn Cullen Live, Monday through Thursday from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. and archived at pghcitypaper.com. The opinions expressed on Lynn Cullen Live are those of the host and do not necessarily reflect the viewpoints of Pittsburgh City Paper or its advertisers.